Hi, everybody. Today we are going to be looking at a review of place value and how we can look at the place value in numbers and what the different place values represent. So we're going to start off by looking at some blocks. And you're going to notice we have four columns. We have the ones, the tens, the hundreds, and the thousands. Now, I just want to remind you what this would look like with the blocks. So the one obviously would be one block. Now, every time we go up a place value, we multiply that place value by 10. So every place value is 10 times bigger than the one before it. So for example, you'll see that a 10 is 10 of those ones, or 10 blocks. So it's 10 times bigger. When we go up to 100, it's going to be either 100 ones, or 100 is also the same as 10 of our 10 blocks. So we see these 10 blocks, it would be the same as 10 of those. And then when we go to 1,000 would be the same as 1,000 ones, 100 tens, or 10 hundreds. So every time we go up a place value, we're looking at that place value being 10 times bigger than the place value before it. So we got to think about that as we get into talking about our places. Now, a place value chart that you might see might look something like this. And notice this one in the red parts, it goes down into decimals. We're not going to talk about that today, but we will eventually. We're going to focus on the blue parts today, which are the whole number of place values. So we start with the ones, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, the 100,000s, the millions, and we could go further, the 10 millions, the 100 millions, the billions, and so forth. So we have each of our place values, and I want to remind you that any place value is 10 times bigger than the one before it. That means when I go from ones to tens, I'm multiplying 10 times as big. When I go from tens to hundreds, I'm multiplying 10 times as big. Now, that means that when you go from the ones place to the hundreds place, it's like multiplying by 10 twice. And if you do 10 times 10, that's 100. So that means the hundreds place is 100 times bigger than the ones. And if we go and say, well, there's also the hundreds to the thousands is 10 times bigger, that would be going from the ones to the thousands would be like multiplying 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. That means it takes 1,000 ones to make 1,000. So anytime you jump one place value, you're multiplying by 10. Anytime you jump two place values, you're multiplying by 10 twice, which is like multiplying by 100. And then anytime you jump three place values, you're multiplying 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. So you're multiplying that number by 1,000 to jump three place values. And that's really important. And that's why our system we call a base 10 system. A base 10 number system is what we call it. All right. So we're going to look a little bit about at each of these digits. Now, let's focus on the blue digits at the top and realize that they each have a different value. So, for example, let's start with the acknowledgement that you see two different threes in this number. Now, 1 3 is in the ones place. If a number is in the ones place, that number just represents 3. Now, the other 3, while also a 3, has a different value because it's in a different place. It doesn't just represent 3 ones, but instead it represents 3 10,000s. Or in other words, it represents 10,000 plus 10,000 plus 10,000, or 3 groups of 10,000. So 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. Instead of just being 3, this 3 represents 30,000. So even though we see two digits that are the same, they represent completely different values because of the different place value that they're in. Now, we could do the same thing with the 2s here. The smaller of the 2s represents 2 hundreds. So 100 and another 100, that means this 2 represents 200 because it's in the hundreds place. The larger 2 represents 200,000s. So 2 groups of 100,000, which this one's going to be harder to fit in here, is going to be equal to 200,000. So we really have to look closely at the place value when we're deciding what is a digit worth. Even if we see multiple twos in the same number, that two is not worth the same because of the place value that it's in. And that's something that we have to think about. Now, the last thing I want to show you today, and we're going to use this example, is talking about how we can actually practice reading our numbers. 253. All right. So, and we're going to look at this number as an example. Now, I know that you've practiced reading numbers before, and I just want to make sure that you're able to do so. So we're going to practice that here. Looking at this number, I want to remind you that any time that you see a comma, that means you should be naming a place. Anytime that you see that comma, you should be naming a place. Otherwise, you're really just saying the digits in three separate parts here. So when I read this number, I'm going to look at my largest place value. So first off, I know that I have the ones, 3 ones, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, the 100,000s, and the millions. I have 7 different place values. I'm going to go and look at my largest place value, which in this case is the millions. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to say 4, and notice I have a comma, so I'm going to say million. 4 million. I'm done with that part. Now I'm going to go to the middle and I'm going to think, what number is that? Well, I see the number 237. So I'm going to start over. I'm going to say 4,237,000. And when I get to the second comma, I have to again say another place value. Now we're below the millions. We're in the thousands. So I'm going to say 4,237,000. And then I'm just left with 253. So 4,237,253. Now you'll notice 2 big things here. Number 1, every time I saw a comma, I gave that place value a name. I told myself what place value that I'm talking about. And number 2, you'll notice that I never said the word and. We don't say the word and until we start talking about decimals. So I had 4,237,253. So give that a shot as you're practicing reading numbers, especially as we get into even bigger numbers sometimes, realizing how to say those numbers. So the big focus here, think about our place values. Think about when a digit is in a place value, what does that mean that it's worth? And this is something that we're going to be talking about a lot over the next few weeks.